release didn't come through, so, but it's okay. I mean, everything happens for a reason, so I'm not going to sweat it. We ready? Okay, this is the first chapter from my new novel. It's tentatively titled Shift. It is in progress. I'm about 60,000 words into it. Started in December. I anticipate being first draft completed by July 1st or so. So who knows how it's going to turn out. But chapter 1, Western France, 1245. Death whispered as it fell on them from above. The boy clutched the crossbow he'd been given before dawn when he'd marched out in a milling square with several dozen others. He'd been taken from his usual duty on the horse lines, handed a crossbow and a knife, and grouped with the men who now stood with him. The men's German tongue was unfamiliar. He was able to pick up the tone of their complaints about the bear in the early mornings, the damp weather. When the sun rose in front of them, their mutters changed tone as they saw the men formed up across from them. The boy watched curiously as the English arrayed themselves in a similar fashion. He started to grin when he realized how few they were. "A good morning for us, maybe," he said to the man beside him. A sound carried from across the fields, a massed thwang rolling down the mist-covered field that just yesterday held cattle. The man beside him gasped and started scrabbling for the shield that hung loosely on his back. The boy was puzzled as he saw others doing the same. Even he knew the English were out of bow range. The sound must have been, and he looked up. The arrows from the English longbows had topped their arc and tipped down upon the ranks huddled below. He could not see the individual arrows, not yet, but the cloud that was racing toward them was not the only one. Another twang rolled across the field, followed by a higher-pitched version. The man beside him cowered under his shield as he started praying. Uncertainly, the boy started to crouch down, and the arrows struck. All around him they fell, piercing exposed flesh and driving through the shields into the men below. Beside him, an arrow went through the shield, through the man, pinning him to the ground below. The low mutter of prayers turned to screams and moans, but the sound he remembered most over the centuries was the sound of the arrows striking the flesh of the cowering men. He dropped his crossbow, tripped over the arrow that had landed beside him, and began running. He wasn't the only one. The cavalry behind him was a mass of confusion as well. The ranks of the crossbowmen had disintegrated, more than half of them dead, the rest screaming or running. Some, like the boy, screamed and ran at the same time. "You, boy, hold!" a man on horseback ordered. A lance came down, blocking his path, and the boy stopped, trembling. The whisper of approaching death came once again and ended in a hollow, wet thump the boy could never forget. The lancer's chest sprouted an Englishman's arrow, and instead of words, blood flowed from the lancer's mouth. He made a low sound, and the hand holding the lance dropped it to explore the strange thing that now growing from his chest. The boy put his head down, running for the hills and the heights in front of him. The low mounds in front of him were almost like home. He had grown up in a village nestled at the base of mountains like this. A new sound echoed from the battlefield behind him. The cheers of the nearly victorious hounded him, and he clapped his hand over his ears to block out the screams of the soon-to-be dead. It was the year 1245, and the boy's crossbow lay broken in the mud of the battlefield. The boy panted, the pain in his side doubling him over. He had watched as the battle rolled over the larger force from his homeland, dispersed by the smaller, more mobile force. He's melted back into the hills as the English pursued the remains of the men who stood against them. He had watched too long, trying to calm the shaking of his arms and his legs. As he made the scamper deeper into the forest, a shout came from behind him. He knew English better than the German he had heard in the hours before. "There, look, a little scamper through the forest. Here, this way!" It was a little warmer, away from the cutting winds being pushed down the mountain, and the ground didn't quite have the snowfall of the open fields. The boy dodged from tree to tree, hoping to find a cut or fold in the land to hide until the soldiers passed. He had grown up on another mountain, far away from this battlefield, and he knew the secrets of the hollows and the valleys. The Baron's forces had been passing through when his stepfather had taken him by the shoulder and dragged him from the stables. He'd had the job for 2 summers taking care of the horses. He carried them, fed and watered the animals, and was a general help. He felt a kinship with the beasts, a connection with them as he looked into their eyes. But his mother had taken a new husband following the death of the boy's father. Judged by some of the village women to be a fine catch, the boy still hadn't cared for him. The way his new stepfather snarled at his mother late at night, or after he'd fallen too far into the potent wine they traded for. He also didn't care for the cries that came from the sleeping bundle late at night, neither the sighs nor gasps that usually preceded the pain. So when his stepfather dragged him by the shoulder and took him to the band of soldiers that was passing through, the boy wasn't surprised. The knife tied at his waist flopped and whacked against his leg. He considered taking it off, tossing it to the side, but it was the only weapon he had left. The crossbow would be worthless back here, so he was glad he had something. He heard the shouts of the men behind him as he spied a copse of blown over trees. Leading up to the trees, the land buckled. Folding over itself, the mountain would offer a hiding place. The wind gusted behind him as he threw a prayer upward. He scurried under the first layer of trees and was on his hands and knees when the fetid smell hit him. The damp odor of fur, urine, the musk of an animal. This was the lair of something. A rustling turned into a roar as a man rose up, shaking off the branches. He was the biggest man the boy had ever seen, and he roared like a bear, the sound almost deafening. The boy rolled, grabbing at his knife, and the giant swung at him, roaring again. Chunks of wood fell into his hair as the boy fought to get free of the branches holding him. If he could get out, wiggle between, agony raked his arm, running down his shoulder and upper chest. The man's arm had reached through the woody material, pinning the boy through his arm and into the tree behind him. A man with claws? Adding a scream of his own, the boy struck with the knife, drawing the giant's blood as he punctured and tore the flesh of his arm, where the giant's blood mixed with his own. Through the branches, the giant looked down at the boy. Wild, feral eyes, backlit by a yellow glow, peered out of the misshapen face, uglier than the ugliest gnome the boy could have imagined. When the giant opened his mouth to roar, the teeth were inhuman, long and jagged, almost like a bear. He'd seen the corpses of mountain bears pulled down from the heights, and these teeth could belong to any of them. The boy screamed again, stabbing with the knife towards the giant's face. He struck a cheekbone, skidding upward towards an eye, barely missing as the man-thing jerked back. The hell was that? The Englishman asked his partner. In the hills above them, a roar sounded, followed by a scream. The two men stopped, looking at each other. Why, I suspect it's that, he said, pointing to a tree. The bark and layers beneath had been destroyed by the swipe of a massive claw, the tree wounded so that sap flowed from it like blood from a wound. The poor mite we've been chasing, he just found that. Well, I don't suppose there will be much left. Do you think the captain would appreciate bear meat? Not with a handful of arrows. It would take a dozen or so to take him down. Another roar echoed down to them, followed by a shrill scream. The two soldiers shared another look and with a shake of the head turned away. The giant's hands were blocky without the fine details of a man's hand, no clearly rounded knuckles, no uniform nails, and as they reached for the boy, they kept shifting. Coarse hair sprouted along the backs of the hands, covering it down to the wrists. The thumb would elongate and shrink, collapsing back into the larger body of the hand. The boy cut off his scream, desperately trying to save his breath. Taking his knife, he cut across the man-thing's massive elbow. He had seen a farrier cripple a horse like that once. Without the supporting tendons, the horse fell to the ground. To his surprise, the hand holding him relaxed and fell to the side. The man made a mewing sound as he tried to make his injured hand obey. He could raise his arm, but his forearm flopped loosely at the elbow. The man stepped back with a wounded roar, the sound weakening, and the boy burrowed deeper into the brush, desperately seeking a way out. He was caught inside the deadfall now. The large trees he sought to hide behind trapped him. Working his way along his stomach, the smell of the beast got stronger. Combined with the blood that covered him, the smell was horrendous. The boy staggered to his feet, having made it out of the tangle of brush, and a massive blow knocked him back down. Fresh fire etched along his back and side, the same one that had taken the earlier abuse. The giant's roar was more of a grunt, and the boy felt the ground shudder as the giant lumbered over. Somehow the knife was still in his hand. Hadn't he dropped it as he fell? He hadn't dropped it as he fell, nor had he skewered himself. If I die, I'll die screaming into his foul breath. I'll die with my knife plunged into his black heart, and I'll die as a man should, no matter my age, he thought. A hand came down and flipped him over, rolling him across the forest floor. The giant lumbered in front of the boy, and he got a good look at the monstrosity in front of him. It was a crudely formed thing, made a man only by the broadest of strokes. Even the skin wasn't truly skin. It was pale leather without fur or feather that occasionally sprouted coarse hair that came and went as the boy watched. The boy staggered to his feet. The man's face shifted as well. His nose pushed forward into a snout and then retreated back. The jaw tried to drop lower, widening, and then returned to the square shape of a man's. It was panting, blood dripping from his wounds. Punctures to the face, more bloody than dangerous. One arm, sliced at the elbow, wasn't obeying the commands of whatever brain controlled it. It would bend at the waist, trying to drop to all fours, then raise back up if it could not decide between man or beast. Come on then, you bastardly thing. Finish me or I'll finish you, the boy gasped. He raised the knife. The beast rumbled, taking a step toward him, and the boy charged. Knowing he had to avoid those massive and changing teeth, the boy took his worthless left arm and used it to shove back the snout of the giant. It huffed in surprise, catching him as he leapt, and wrapped the one arm that would obey around the boy's midsection. The force of the boy's forearm surprised the giant and forced his head back, exposing his throat. Twisting his head to the side, the giant's nose and mouth shifted back to a snout, and he clamped his teeth on the boy's forearm. The boy felt the bones crumble under the force of the jaw's power, and he whimpered in the giant's grasp. Pushing again, he forced the thing's head back, exposing the throat, and then struck with the knife. The grunts turned to gurgles as blood began to flow over both of them, a hot jet that covered the boy's face, working its way into his mouth and nose. The boy choked, coughing against the hot liquid that kept striking. The giant's grasp loosened seconds before the force would have crushed the boy. The boy found himself sliding, and he plunged the knife in one last time and tried to hold onto the hilt. The giant's mouth opened, releasing the boy's mangled forearm, and he dangled there, holding onto the knife as the bear swayed. The boy's grip finally slipped, and he hit the ground, falling away from the tottering giant. The boy managed to crawl only a few feet before the giant finally fell. The giant and the boy locked eyes, and the golden glow of the creature's eyes flickered as the boy watched. The golden fire dimmed until nothing but a black orb was left. The boy turned his head, feeling the blood leaving his body in many places. I forgot to scream, he thought. The beast thing is dead, but I forgot to scream. He closed his eyes and drifted away. Sometime after dark, he woke up, or if not waking up, came to a level of consciousness he couldn't recognize. His body felt warm, strange since the night was so cold. He could see his breath. His limbs were dead weight, but he could feel the warmth of his blood as it coursed through him. He sniffed. The smells of the forest were rich, a mixture of the loamy earth in which he was curled. He could smell the freshness of the trees behind him and the perfume of the fallen leaves. He sniffed again. Something smelled of place, of home, and he knew that if he died, he wanted to die there. He levered himself up. In the dark, a shape was near him, but he ignored it. It was dead and cold, something to ignore, maybe forever. One of his arms wouldn't work, so he used the other. He pulled himself along, following the inviting smell, and he realized it was the smell of home. Not the smell of his mother's home, with the small hearth and the bedroll beside it, but a home he could curl up in and sleep while the cold settled over the land. Working his way deeper into the den, he found the place where home smelled the strongest and collapsed there. That's it. Thank you.